This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace.
Last year, I went through many different life changes. I needed to take a pause and examine how I was feeling in the inside to better show up for the ones who need me to be my best version of myself.
When you're navigating life's changes, Talkspace can help. Talkspace is the #1 rated online therapy, bringing you professional support from licensed therapists and psychiatry providers that you can access anytime, anywhere.
Living a busy life, navigating a long-distance relationship, becoming a first-step father, Talkspace made all of those journeys possible. I could speak with my therapist in the office. I could speak with my therapist in the comfort of my home. I was never alone.
Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance, no problem. Now get $80 off your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Welcome to IgAN Journey, the IgA Nephropathy Foundation's podcast. Here, we share information, tips, stories, and inspiration for living with IgAN. Using the power of our growing patient community, we are focused on funding research and building a network of support and ultimately finding a cure. To learn more about IgAN, to get involved, or help fuel our mission with financial support, visit IgAN.org.
Welcome to this episode of IgAN Journey. April is Organ Donation Month, a time to honor those who have saved lives by donating the gift of a kidney or other organ. It's also a chance to call attention to the huge need for organ, eye, and tissue donors. For many people with IgA nephropathy with advanced disease, kidney transplant is the most effective and may be the preferred treatment option. But finding a living donor isn't always easy. The search can feel overwhelming, with some people saying it's a bit like a race against time to find a suitable match, and many more are hesitant to ask people to make such a huge gift. Today, we are pleased to have Texas Senator Kelly Hancock with us to share his personal IgAN story, what it was like to receive a new kidney from his son-in-law, as well as his message to other families affected by the disease, and his steadfast efforts to support policies that are supportive of organ donation. Senator Hancock, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
So can you share a little bit about when you first learned that you had IgAN and how you felt about it at the time?
At the time, pretty devastating. It was, I guess, almost 32 years ago now. In fact, it was shortly after we had our first child. So she was young and literally just a couple of months old, and had been playing racquetball with actually a customer and just didn't feel good, and got home, and there were clearly some signs that something was wrong and felt like I had the flu. And so we began doing various testing and did a lot of different testing. And way back 30 years ago, they knew so little about IgA nephropathy. And so ended up, long story short, ended up having a biopsy. In fact, biopsy was shortly before my sister was married and got married. And so I remember that very clearly. And of course, we were a young couple with young children and with IgA nephropathy. I was told what everybody else with the disease is told is, hey, this could be 2 days, 2 months, 2 years. We really don't know. And so pretty devastating and not knowing. And really, we had to adjust to it. And not knowing what tomorrow would hold. And of course, fortunately, we had many years, but at the time it was pretty devastating for a young family.
Sure. Well, yeah, we hear that all the time, that the unpredictability of the disease is part of what takes such a toll on people's lives. And certainly the fact that it often strikes when people are having young families and building careers. It's not easy. So I know you decided to keep your diagnosis private for a number of years. At what stage did you decide to tell people outside of your immediate family?
We shared before we really knew what it was, that, hey, there's some things going on, and share with some couples from our church and friends, dinner group friends that we were with, that things were going on. But once we found out that it was IgA and there wasn't much you could do, we just chose to, rather than kind of dwell in that swamp. We decided just to live our life, and my family knew, but we just decided to go ahead and live and see what happens with the disease and address it as it progressed or whatever came about. And so it was always there in the back of your mind. And obviously, when you go and get your labs, it's not in the back anymore; it's on the front because you're doing blood work, and that was pretty consistent for a while.
Well, and I know you did lots of living between having an active family life, and I know you ran marathons too.
Yeah, that was interesting. So I was a runner. I'd run prior to being diagnosed and always stayed active. And initially, they actually told me don't run more than 3 miles at a moderate pace. Got a different nephrologist in Dallas, and he was a runner. And he said, actually, we know so little about this. We do what you feel comfortable with. And yeah, I was able to run the New York Marathon a couple of times, ran Fort Worth Marathon a couple of times. So 6 total. But then, and my last one was with the daughter, my oldest daughter, who was just a couple of months old when diagnosed. But that was kind of it. And then I guess really when I got down to 15% or less, all of a sudden my energy level began to drop, and I wasn't able to push myself quite the way I was earlier on.
Yeah, when we talk about 15%, we're talking obviously kidney function.
Right.
So I know you're coming up on, 2 years since receiving a life-saving kidney transplant from your son-in-law. And I'm sure that's brought you much closer. And since then, I know you were giving testimony in front of friends and colleagues and thanked him, your son-in-law, Greg, for saving your life. What has it been like to receive such a selfless gift from him? And how did those initial conversations go?
Initially, the first sharing with my family. So it was probably roughly 7 years ago that I was told I was within a year or two of having to go on dialysis or needing a kidney. And so I shared with the family at that point, hey, we hadn't talked about this in a long time, but it's to that point that we knew we'd get to at some point. And so I kind of shared with them that I'm really close. We're not there yet. And then, of course, I was able to make it a couple of years longer than what they anticipated. But then all of a sudden got tested, and my nephrologist said, hey, in fact, it was right after session. I got tested, and he said, immediately, I need you to come back. And that was kind of a trigger for me that, all right, I'm at that point that I knew I'd get at some point. We're at a level that we need to register for a transplant. And so told my family then that, hey, I've hit the level and we're going to be registering. And really, unbeknownst to me, I had 8 different family members that started the process to go through to be a living donor. And strangely enough, it was my son-in-law that was actually the best match.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. And I know it generated a lot of local news coverage. I've seen the picture of the matching robes that Red Eye gave it, and the other Red Eye got it with the kidney on them, which was really sweet. Was this the son-in-law of your first daughter?
It was, yeah. So kind of interesting timing there. And we kept it quiet. We did that. We actually did a news interview prior to the transplant and just asked them to please hold it until everything went okay after the surgery. And then that was delayed because I ended up getting sick about a week before surgery was to take place, and we had to delay it a month. And I was still not well, and so we delayed it again. So I actually had it delayed, which is fairly common and can be very, very frustrating, but you just have to kind of hang in there. The surgery was delayed twice before we were able to have the transplant surgery.
We are proud as a foundation to now have local leaders and volunteers who are affected by IgA nephropathy in communities across the country. And we've actually been asking some of them who are at your point where they've had a kidney transplant, what would they say is the one thing that has changed and the one thing that has stayed the same? What would you say in terms of your experience?
Well, probably the big one is my diet. I mean, when being a marathon runner, very disciplined. And so the closer I got or the worse my kidneys got, the more limited I began to restrict my diet. Mm-hmm. Things would pop up and I'd try to figure out what I ate, what took place, and I would limit that. So my diet really at the end was kind of a Mediterranean diet almost, very limited protein, really avoided any meats at all, and more of a vegetarian, and even then limited on the vegetarian because of the potassium and the phosphorus. So very limited. And then it's kind of funny, I hadn't had barbecue in years, and actually had fundraisers for political campaigns at barbecue joints, and couldn't eat my own barbecue because of the situation. And the first thing I had that night in the hospital was a barbecue sandwich. And so your diet changes so dramatically.
Yeah.
I wouldn't eat nuts because my kidneys being bad, it was tough. And one of the first things, had some magnesium issues, began eating nuts rather than changing my medication in order to address that. So my diet's, and anybody that's gone through it, the minute you get a new kidney versus one that's failing and one that's in the lower functioning, it changes overnight. And that's actually kind of been fun. I get to look at the whole menu instead of one or two items.
All right. And then what's one thing that stayed the same?
I stayed exercising, and so, which I'm glad I did. Literally the day before surgery, I couldn't walk because the toxins had built up my feet, but I went to the gym and I cycled for, 7 miles, and, and I was always able to lift. And so I just kept the exercise literally up until the day before surgery. And then I had to limit that for a while. And after the surgery, they're very careful, but, started yoga, and which I hadn't done before, but I just got back into exercising as soon as I could, and I have continued that. And I think it was really one of the things that allowed me to recover so quickly, was trying to stay in shape the best I could prior to. And even though I would go, quote, run 2 miles there at the end, it was, maybe running 100 yards and then walking and then running. But I did whatever I could do as long as I could do it from an exercise standpoint.
Sure. One, and just even the release of feel-good hormones and how much it kind of improves your ability to cope with stress. And we tell people all the time, I think some people feel very scared by exercise, quote unquote, but just even moving your body, just going for a walk, anything.
Sure. And you have to be careful. I mean, stay hydrated. I drink a lot of water. I did beforehand. I drink that now. I haven't. People ask about caffeine. Well, I hadn't had caffeine in forever because of the bad kidney. I hadn't really had soft drinks in forever because of the bad kidney. It allowed me to do some other things because I was very disciplined on both exercising and diet.
Sure. And we've heard from some of our volunteers, obviously, just that knowing that IgAN can return. That's not always the case, but knowing that IgAN can return in the new kidney. So there's some worry while waiting for labs, which can be still one of the hardest parts.
Sure. But there's all kinds of things we can worry about. And years ago, especially with this, knowing with IgA nephropathy and living with it for years, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. But you don't have any control over it to speak of. I had a disciplined diet, and I think that helped. At the end of the day, IgA nephropathy is going to do what it's going to do. And I didn't choose to spend my time that I had, not knowing how much I had, worrying on things I couldn't change. There's enough things I can impact in my life, but worrying about something you can't change, I would just say find something else to worry about.
Yeah, I think that's a really healthy outlook. What's your advice to other people living with IgAN who are nearing the stage of needing to think about transplantation? You talked earlier about how you kind of thought about it a little early on, but do you have sort of some tips that you would offer for other people who are nearing that point of needing to think about transplant?
Well, for me, I was just always leaned to my faith, and I dreaded dialysis. Mm-hmm. I was much more comfortable because of my faith with death than I was going on dialysis because my activity level. Wow. And so that's where I went, and that's where I would encourage people to look. But recognize you're very, very limited in what you can do about it. But what you can do is you can try to stay healthy, you can try to stay active, and do what you can do as long as you can do it. And then when that time comes, don't be afraid. In fact, we're very involved in Donate Life and raise significant money to help them. People can live with one kidney, and My son-in-law has great joy in what he was able to do, and his life hasn't changed. And so you have to be you, and you have to do what you're comfortable with. But I wouldn't be afraid to make their request known. And it is a difficult decision. I mean, when I got to that point, and my son-in-law said, I mean, they had young children. In fact, I had a newborn, and I had to sleep on it a day or two to decide whether I wanted to put him through that. And and I think we're both glad that we made the decisions we made.
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing gift.
Yeah.
But I hear you saying don't be afraid to ask. I think that happens a lot where people are afraid.
Right. Let people know. And we've talked, as we've assisted with other organizations and living donor situations, the living donors have great joy in being able to impact somebody's life in such a positive manner as we were able to impact. And and the other thing is, I registered in multiple regions. For us, Dallas region was separate than the Fort Worth region, and two different regions. And so, I mean, I had to spend different days, and then I work in Austin a lot because of being in the state Senate.
Yeah.
And I was prepared to go register in Austin. And so just, leave your options open, because there's a need and there's people that want to fulfill that need.
And you mentioned this already, but I know you've been very involved with supporting efforts to encourage more Texans to know that they too can save someone's life by being a kidney donor or a donor in general. Can you tell us a little bit about these efforts and the things that you've done to help support the Living Donor Act and other efforts?
Sure. We passed legislation and passed a resolution trying to bring attention to it. We've done a lot of interviews to bring attention to it, because the vast majority of transplants that are needed are kidney and lung transplants, and kidney definitely stands out. And that's something that people can volunteer. They can donate a kidney and have their lives change only for a period of time and then get back to their normal life. And so we've encouraged that because it is such life-changing and beneficial for both people.
Yeah.
On doing that, the legislation provides some training and teaching that the state has, just like when you do your driver's license, you can check the box. You can check that to be a living donor. And so what we've tried to do is bring a lot of attention to it. We had a big event during session to raise money, a big concert, and we're able to raise roughly $200,000 for Donate Life to help them provide the education and the marketing tool to let people know, educate them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know you found the IgA Nephropathy Foundation after you had shared with folks your diagnosis. Do you remember anything about that sort of connection? I know you mentioned that those sort of organizations have reached out to you.
Right. And just kind of comforting with IgA Nephropathy Association, because it is such a rare disease. I mean, I'd never known anybody with IgA nephropathy when I was diagnosed with it, and literally all but 30 years until we did the TV interview about the transplant. And, I had a call from a father in Colorado whose son was a college athlete, just diagnosed, and just had questions. And so I was able to spend some time with him on the phone. And then we actually had a friend of theirs was diagnosed, and same thing, but for him, within a couple of days, he was on dialysis.
Wow.
And the husband ended up donating his kidney. And so kind of unique situation shortly after. But it is comforting and it is helpful, I think, to know that there's an association down there because of the rarity of the disease that you can contact, you can ask questions, and you can just get in touch with somebody that knows what you're going through, carrying this in your head and in your body, and just the different ways to deal with it. So I think it's just beneficial to know you're not alone out there. And that was helpful for me even after the fact, because it's such a rare disease. And you explain it to people and you get the same question every time. Well, is it hereditary? No, it's not right. So how did you get it? Well, it's just is what it is, you know.
Hopefully we'll have many of those answers in the coming years. But yeah, there's still so much unknown. And Bonnie will be happy to hear what you just shared, because I think in starting this foundation, her goal was to make sure that no one was alone in this. There were very few answers at the time, as you know.
Yeah, we want it to be rare, right? But we also want to be able to have somewhere we can go and talk to people that are experiencing the same thing we are. And even with IgA and nephropathy, the experience is very different for everybody. I was blessed with 30 years, but every day I didn't know what year that was going to happen.
Yep. Yeah. Looking back on your IgAN journey, is there anything you would have done differently?
I don't think so. And again, it's kind of like worrying about things you can't change. I'm not one that kind of looks back in a negative manner, and because again, there's nothing I can do about it. It worked out well for me. Being real strict on my diet, keeping the exercise going, did it help? I really don't know. I know it didn't hurt.
Sure.
On that, and it certainly helped on my recovery.
What's your best advice to other people who are living with IgAN?
I think it is good to find the place. The association's a good place where you can talk with somebody. Don't be afraid to ask your nephrologist questions and develop that relationship with them. And just don't dread it. I mean, life's short. We never know what tomorrow's going to bring, especially those with the disease. Is just do what you can to enjoy the time you have and live your life to the fullest. I mean, that's really what I tried to do, and stayed very active and involved. And like I said, I wouldn't go back and change anything at this point.
Well, and certainly your public role has made a huge difference for so many people and drawing attention to the need for donors. So we thank you very much for that. Anything else that you want to add?
I do think IgA nephropathy can be a great learning experience. I've told people that I really wouldn't change anything. It strengthened my faith. It's kind of made me who I am because of not knowing what tomorrow's going to bring. Is my perspective in life is very different. It's, especially my relationship with my wife. I was always thinking about where would I leave her and what position. And so financially and other things, we made decisions not knowing what our long-term outlook was going to be. And yet just enjoying life a day at a time is something we don't do enough of. But those of us with the disease, it is one of the blessings that we can learn from it, is learning how to enjoy one day at a time.
Sure. I mean, obviously it provides perspective, and it sounds like it allowed you to be a little bit more purposeful in your life decisions too.
Oh, you have to be.
Yeah.
Because you don't know.
Yeah. And I think people are going to be happy to hear that your son-in-law is thriving. And to your point about people do only need one kidney, and I think they worry that the burden's going to be significant on the donor. But it sounds like everything's been great for all of you.
No, he's doing great. Exercising. Saw him playing basketball the other day. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and we'll be happy to share your story with our listeners.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining IgAN Journey, the IgA Nephropathy Foundation's podcast. Here we share information, practical tips, stories, and inspiration for living with IgAN. Everyone's at a different point in their IgAN journey, but we're here for you. You're not alone. To learn more about IgAN, to get involved, or help fuel our mission with financial support, visit www.igan.org. The information and opinions shared in IgAN Journey are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice. Always speak with your nephrology care team about treatments that are right for you.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ziprecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.